Whoa. Slow down, Albedo. Time out here. Come again? Alright, so I just finished up the new Archon quest in Mondstadt in 5.6, and honestly I thought it was very good. The lack of voice acting is really starting to annoy me. I'll talk about that at the end of the video. That's my only complaint about this quest. It was a lot shorter than I thought it was going to be, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it did exactly what it needed to do, and overall just a really good Archon quest. Answered some questions, tied up some loose ends that we had, but also left us with some new intriguing lore bits and cryptic things that can now marinate with us for a bit. And I do want to make its own video going over Rhinedottir specifically, since there's a lot to unpack here, obviously. And obviously not related to the video, but I actually got Navia's signature weapon on a 10 pull. I told myself I was only gonna pull 30 times and I snagged it on the first try. Navia's debatably my favorite character to play as, and it's the only signature weapon cool enough to entice me to pull, and I'm glad I got it. You're already off to a phenomenal start to this patch. We're still going to talk about Rhinedottir in this video, along with the Hexenzirkel. Barbara Luth had a pretty cryptic line I want to talk about. But let's recap the quest first, because this quest was not just a standalone Archon quest. It acted as a sequel to two other event quests that we got before. You probably don't even remember it because it happened all the way back in 2.3. There was an event on Dragonspine where Albedo, Eula, Amber, and Bennett all fought against an imposter, a monster impersonating Albedo that was attacking them on Dragonspine, and nobody could figure out why Albedo was turning hostile. Well, it was the imposter. And then we got that cool cutscene at the end of the event, with Albedo confronting the imposter, which we learn in this quest he obviously dealt with them and buried them on Dragonspine, disposing of them. An imposter on Dragonspine who was a failed specimen abandoned in Durin's stomach, an unsuccessful iteration of the Homunculus project. But this quest also acts as a sequel to last year's Summer Simulanka event, with Mini Dvalin being an important piece here. We'll talk about Mini Dvalin too, because that opens a whole new avenue of how we look at dragons and Conrians. Now, just some brief context on Durin before we continue with this, because you might forget some of the old Mondstadt lore from the beginning of the game. It's been years after all. Several hundred years ago, so around the Cataclysm, Dvalin with the help of Barbatos defeated the dragon Durin and sealed the remains on Dragonspine. Durin was obviously created through alchemy and was considered one of the finest specimens of artificial life. And as such, death was not a true end for him. His heart still beats on Dragonspine to this day, and the life force that comes with it, able to influence monsters and fester there. And Albedo could sense the impending attack, and Durin's influence growing. This is also why at the very beginning of the game, Dvalin was acting out of sorts and attacking the city. He had been corrupted by the Abyss after defeating Dvalin. As Durin sits there on Dragonspine, creatures and monsters are able to spawn from his power, and have the ability to transform and take on the appearance of different people or things. Albedo started to notice that many who ventured into Dragonspine came back very different. Some were obviously under the influence of Durin's power, but the less fortunate ones had already been devoured by monsters, and then those monsters assumed their appearance to infiltrate the city. So what the Knights of Avonius did, in order to trick the monsters and imposters, is pretend to have one of their knights missing on a very specific top secret mission. One of the imposters assumed their identity and they all played along. Naturally, Albedo is taking out some of these imposters and burying their remains, or trying to dispose of their remains, but then he gets spotted by different individuals. And this is the premise of the entire quest. Soon as we get to Mondstadt, we can see that other characters are acting out of sorts. It's Windbloom, but yet the vibe here is very ominous and different. We even have that scene where Donna talks about how she has a crush on Diluc but maybe doesn't anymore. Now she kind of favors Kaya. Who could have guessed that a girl would have a crush on the richest, handsomest guy in Mondstadt that also happens to be a knight prodigy? And he's a little edgy to boot. It's a revelation. But then Kaya recruits us to help with the case. Jean is overseeing it as the judge, with Dahlia aiding her. Dahlia being a deacon of the Church of Avonius, and a herald to Barbatos, because he knows that Venti is Barbatos. And to my knowledge, Mondstadt is the only nation in all of Genshin that has a church and frequently worships their Archon. And it actually makes a ton of sense for Venti to have at least one person that he can relay and communicate through the people with, without actually showing himself and revealing his secret identity. But anyways, as you would expect, the majority of the court case isn't looking good for Albedo. He's looking incredibly guilty. But he remains calm, and naturally we get involved, trying to uncover the truth, going through Albedo's things, and even talking with Venti himself. Now, something I talked about in my Mondstadt character video is Albedo has always been very closely monitored by not just Venti himself, but Dainsleif. Dainsleif is ready to kill Albedo at a moment's notice if he ever steps out of line. For the people that know Albedo's true identity and what he actually is, he's essentially treated like a time bomb that could go off. I mean, just look what happened with Durin, and a lot of the other monsters that Rhinedottir created. Dainsleif views him as a threat, but so does Venti. So Venti, although wants to give Albedo the benefit of the doubt, can't turn a blind eye to the fact that he is, at the end of the day, very dangerous. But like we already talked about, the Knights of Avonia's plan comes to fruition. They're able to catch the doppelgangers by surprise, and this is where the monsters attack the city, and this was a very cool sequence. I very much enjoyed that you got to play as a lot of different Mondstadt characters, going around the city, protecting it, even getting to use Barbara, for example, to heal some of the knights that got wounded in the battles. The sequence with Amber and Micah on the castle walls was really cool, even though these two together are just not it. It was painful using these two to actually kill monsters, but the sequence was really cool. Don't get me wrong, and obviously Diluc and Kaya locking in at the gate. No one's getting by these guys. Nobody. Them having their little back and forth. I like how Albedo humbles Kaya a little bit with that one-liner like, "Oh, you hold the rank of captain, that which Diluc held before you. Diluc is the youngest captain in Knight's history. He's the prodigy." It was just funny. Another thing I wasn't expecting but thought it was a nice surprise is the darker tone they took when talking about the people and citizens that were kidnapped and impersonated. Like, they were absolutely butchered and slaughtered, and they don't even hesitate to tell you that. It just makes it feel like the stakes are a little bit higher. Eula is also one of my favorite characters in Mondstadt, and I love the sequence where she loses Klee. Klee being a little child, they all feel like they gotta look after her and protect her, obviously, but then they all forget how powerful Klee actually is. She can hold her own. Then with Venti's help, he's able to facilitate a meeting between Varka and the mages, a meeting called the Tri-Party Conference, something that Varka came up with where the Grandmaster, the Animal Archon, and the Hexenzirkel meet up. Then they actually call Varka where he's in the middle of a battle, and he's still got that happy-go-lucky personality. What an absolute Chad. I knew in my heart of hearts that we weren't gonna meet Varka yet. It's too soon, too good to be true, but he was teased a little bit in the trailer, so you're like, you never know, it's in Mondstadt, it's Windbloom, right? At least we got some voice lines and we'll be meeting him soon, so I was content with this. I thought it was a good, brief introduction to him and what he's all about. Just seems like such a based individual. And you just know, even through talking with him on this device, while he's in a battle, he is decimating whoever he's fighting, you just know it. But we do get to talk with Alice. Again, I nearly teased myself into thinking they would actually show her, but of course not. Albedo needs her help in some materials to turn Mini Durin into a human. Alice is able to help us with this, but we have to pass her trial first, where we get shrunken down on the chessboard and we have to defeat the king and queen pieces. Halfway through the battle, Barbara Luth takes over and says a very cryptic line which we're going to talk about at the end of the video. But it's also reinforcing this idea of Teyvat and this entire story, the bigger picture, being like a chess game, with the Gnosis being the chess pieces. Once we complete the trial, then Albedo is able to complete his task and turn Mini Durin into a human. Albedo is able to absorb the remaining life force of Durin and his heart that still beats on Dragonspine and shrink it down. Using this, along with his powers of alchemy and the resources he gained from Alice during the trial, to finally turn Mini Durin into a human. Mini Durin being created in a storybook Simulanka. Albedo's thought process being that Mini Durin's pure parts can balance out the evil of actual Durin and his life force. Mini Durin does not even know what he will become once he turns into a human with that life force. Now, there's something worth mentioning here. The Shade of Life created Egeria the First Hydro Archon, and then Egeria herself gave the Oceanids of Fontaine humanity and the chance to live human lives, which we know how the Heavenly Principles responded to that with a prophecy to kill all in Fontaine. Now we find ourselves in a very similar predicament. The Shade of Life, who is essentially Rhinedottir now, we'll talk about that, created Albedo, and Albedo is now giving humanity to this storybook dragon. Now obviously I would never presume to be able to read the thoughts of the Heavenly Principles. They're all-knowing after all. They are at the top of the food chain for a reason, but if I was a betting man, I would say they would not be happy about this. And this exactly is the epitome of why the Heavenly Principles does what they do. Why there is such thing as forbidden knowledge and divine punishment to begin with. Again, in a vacuum, this might not seem like a big deal, but in the bigger picture of Teyvat and its entire timeline, this is kind of a big deal what he's doing here. And we get a quick glimpse of what the human Durin looks like, but this is just a quick glimpse, and Durin is still stabilizing in its human form, so we actually don't know what it's going to look like, the end result, and how this is going to go. Is Durin going to be stable as a human? Is he going to be hostile? How will this look when some time passes? Obviously, we're going to have to wait to find out, but this also sets up a very interesting precedent with how alchemy is used in Khaenri'ah back in the day. And from all we've learned in Natlan with the dragon civilizations, how advanced they are, and the different ties between Khaenri'ahns and dragons, this does raise a lot of interesting questions. Unfortunately, I won't have enough time to answer those in this video. This is the name of what Albedo is called. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but this is the name of a synthetic being created by the type of alchemy that Rhindottir used. And now Mini Durin in his human form falls under that category. How fitting that Mini Durin also has a relationship with Hat Guy, or Scaramouche, who is also a very similar synthetic being. Albedo then proceeds to drop some of the biggest lore we've had in a while. The ruler or Shade of Life is named Naberius, and Albedo then tells us that his master and mother, aka Rhindottir Gold, absorbed or merged with Naberius or even ate Naberius, but also says that the ruler of life is not gone, but instead because of Rhindottir's actions, she and Naberius are now one. So Rhindottir merged with the Shade of Life, which explains so much of her powers, how she's able to give life to all these creatures. Remember, the Shade of Life created Egeria, the first Hydro Archon, among other things we do not know. Maybe we'll learn more. And honestly, this was shocking in the moment. Looking at Rhindottir and now Albedo's powers and how powerful they actually are, this actually makes a lot of sense to me. I still need to sit on this for a bit and analyze it further, because obviously this is huge. We also get that line from Albedo talking about how his mother, Rhindottir, didn't just want him to be a living being that's alive, but actually live. Like, integrate into human society, their culture, their customs, and be a part of it. Actually live, not just be alive. And I honestly thought that was pretty wholesome, I'm not gonna lie. Learning that Rhindottir is now the Shade of Life, essentially, is crazy, because it tells us so much more than we realize. Teyvat is a world that's always been governed by the Primordial One, or the Heavenly Principles. The dragons got usurped, but we even learned last patch in an artifact set that a visitor from another world came and met with Nibelung and made friends with him even before the Primordial One got here. I mean, we've went over all of this many times on this channel, but this just really reinforces the idea of Khaenri'ah trying to stand out on its own, without being ruled over by the Heavenly Principles. They gained so much power and technology through the Abyss, but also clearly gained the ability to create life through different science and alchemy arts, and Rhindottir straight up merging with the Shade of Life is human arrogation at its finest. The Heavenly Principles didn't even like Egeria giving Oceanids humanity. They were punished with a prophecy that we had to play through in Fontaine's Archon quest. So needless to say that they would probably not like the fact that a human in Khaenri'ah of all places absorbed one of their 4 shades, one of the 4 archangels that oversee Teyvat and their humans since the earliest days. That is a massive piece of information that I need to sit on for a bit, because this opens up the door to so much more. But this whole idea that a person can absorb or fuse with a shade, becoming one with the shade, where the shade still technically exists but not in the same way, well, I kind of think this concept opens the door to answering what happened to Istaroth. I mean, the parallels between Venti and Istaroth have been huge for years now. This is no secret, but I think it's a very reasonable conclusion to speculate that the Anemo Archon might have fused with Istaroth, the Shade of Time. There is certainly a ton of Easter eggs pointing towards this, but again, we'll talk about this in a later video, go into more depth. Then we get that very cryptic line from Mona's master, Barbara Luth, one of the Hexenzirkel witches. She says, "Stare straight ahead, and you will see things as they appear, but change your perspective, and you will see them as they are," flipping the chessboard upside down. And again, there's a lot of parallels between Teyvat and a giant chess game, but this also feeds into the idea that Teyvat is upside down, something widely speculated for years. And Teyvat having a false sky, which has been confirmed now, I don't know, personally I can't help but feel like Barbara Luth is foreshadowing something to us here very subtly, since Barbara Luth herself stands out among the Hexenzirkel as a visionary. Somebody so skilled in astrology that she can read the fortune of everyone within Teyvat. Remember, it's like I always talk about. The reason every character has constellations and why Mona and her master can read them is because everyone is programmed within the data of Teyvat. If you think of Teyvat like a giant hive mind, and Irminsul acts as the hard drive, all of the waypoints in Teyvat make up the constellations of everyone living within it. Obviously the main characters that we play as and pull on, since they are vision holders, and vision holders have the chance to ascend to Celestia and become part of the program. Vision holders are the Heavenly Principle's way to recruit people to keep Teyvat isolated and the way that it is. Vision holders and their destinies already predetermined. That is the entire idea of Teyvat within this bubble, simulated prison world, whatever you want to call it. Breaking the mold, which is what Conria was trying to do, and nearly succeeded. Rhinedottir creating life on her own merits, completely forbidden by the Heavenly Principles. People with ambitions like Rhinedottir or the other 5 sinners is exactly what the Heavenly Principles does not want. It has the chance then to break Teyvat out of the false sky, and the samsara that everyone is living here. This just really puts into perspective more that the Hexenzirkel themselves, these witches, Rhinedottir, Alice, Barbara Luth, they all sort of transcend Teyvat outside its borders and what the Heavenly Principles is governing. That is why I feel her line here so incredibly cryptic, but potentially foreshadowing, I don't know. It's just interesting to think about. I also am going to make a video talking about just the Hexenzirkel themselves, all the members, since, you know, they're going to play a big part in Nodcry very soon. So making that video, we can recap their lore and what we know so far. But that is essentially going to wrap up the Archon quest. Overall, I thought it was a very good quest. It wrapped up a lot of loose ends, gave us some more lore, some interesting storytelling, but it also gave us even more questions now we can marinate with and make theories on. Just sitting here right now recording this, I'm thinking of like 2 or 3 off the top of my head. But before I completely wrap it up, I just want to say, yeah, it's getting to the point now where they either need to figure out this whole voice acting situation or recast them. I personally think recasting some of these iconic characters that we've known for years would be devastating. At the end of the day, if you're gonna do it, just do it. I would rather that than it be silence. At least Eula had a voice actor. There's a reason I knew I liked you, Eula. But all the interactions with Venti, Jean, Diluc and Kaya's banter, Albedo himself, like Albedo has a great voice actor and it's always very intriguing because Albedo is such a smart, methodical person and very soft-spoken. He was always interesting. It was always interesting listening to him. A lot of people do tell me that I should just switch so that it's a different dub and I'll actually get to hear it. But to me, I find that even more jarring to listen to a completely different language that I don't understand and have to read it anyway. I don't know, I just don't feel I should have to do that. I'm not completely up to date on the drama with the VA since I try to just avoid that stuff. It's not really my bread and butter. At the beginning, I know it was all about supporting the VA strike. Then it was kind of turning towards, oh, the VAs are actually the ones causing the drama and trying to gaslight everyone else that isn't part of some union. To be honest, I don't have enough credibility or information on it to make a stance, nor do I want to. I just hope everyone gets what they want and we can just move on from it. Bring Venti's voice back. Bring all these characters' voice back. I'm tired of this. And if not, then recast them. I don't know. We better not be getting this shit in Nodcry, let me tell you. Overall, it didn't ruin the quest for me by any means. I still thought it was a banger quest, but I just feel like enough is enough. We're going on a year now where this has been going on and just, I don't know. I'd like it to be done. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this, and as always, we will see you all in the next one. Later.